The Varos Prime Palace shimmered like a mirage against the pale azure sky, its crystalline spires reflecting the binary suns that graced this corner of the Aurelian sector. Constructed of glass and molten alloy, materials that should never have held together, the royal residence defied both gravity and expectation, much like its occupant, Queen Varea, sovereign of 17 systems, ruler of the most technologically advanced empire in 3 quadrants, and the woman who had once looked at Kale Damari with something other than cold disdain. That had been 4 standard years ago. Now, as Kale strode through the translucent corridors toward the throne room, his footsteps echoed against the impossible architecture. Guards in crystalline armor tracked his movement, their biomech augmentations humming with anticipation. They recognized him. Of course they did. But his royal clearance had never been revoked. An oversight, perhaps, or something else entirely. "The Queen is holding court," announced the Master of Ceremonies, a tall, gaunt man whose skin had been genetically modified to shimmer like the palace walls. "She is not receiving personal visitors." The emphasis on personal wasn't lost on Kale. He smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "I'm not here on personal business," he lied, the weight of the data crystal in his pocket belying his words. "This is a matter of imperial security." The master's eyebrows rose fractionally, the most emotion his modified face could manage. "Her Majesty will decide that," he said, stepping aside with practiced grace. "Though I warn you, the mood in court today is austere." Kale adjusted the collar of his standard-issue flight jacket, deliberately informal amidst the courtier's finery, and nodded. "When is it not?" The massive doors to the throne room parted silently, an engineering feat that still impressed despite Kale's familiarity with the palace. Inside, the vaulted chamber stretched upward, its ceiling a tapestry of light filtered through strategic imperfections in the crystal. Court was indeed in session. At least 50 nobles stood in concentric circles around the dais where Varea sat, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable behind a thin veil of woven luminescence. Kale chose the most disruptive entrance possible, straight through the center of the gathering, disrupting the careful choreography of supplication and favor currying that constituted imperial politics. Whispers followed him like ripples in still water. "Is that the pilot? Former royal prisoner. Thought he'd been executed, banished to the outer systems." Varea's attention shifted to him immediately, though she gave no outward sign beyond the slightest tensing of her fingers on the armrests of her crystal throne. She was speaking to a trade delegate from Persea Minor. Something about agricultural tariffs and gene modification rights. But her words faltered for just a moment, enough for Kale to know she recognized him. He stopped at the prescribed distance, not bothering with the customary bow. Silence fell over the assembly. "Kale Damari," she said finally, her voice carrying the artificial perfection granted by vocal augmentations. "You interrupt imperial business." "Your Majesty," he replied, the formal address tasting bitter on his tongue. "I wouldn't dream of it. I merely came to return something of yours." He made no move to produce the data crystal. The court held its collective breath. Everyone present knew their history, though few knew the truth of it. The Queen and the prisoner. A scandal whispered behind cupped hands. A romance speculated upon but never confirmed. Varea's eyes narrowed behind her veil. "Whatever you believe belongs to me can be surrendered to my chamberlain. You have no business in this court." "Don't I?" Kale took another step forward, causing the royal guards to shift uneasily. 4 years ago, I stood in this exact spot while you pronounced my sentence. Doesn't seem right that the return should happen anywhere else." The Queen's hand rose in a subtle gesture, stopping her guards from advancing. "You were pardoned and released, Damari. Your continued presence in the Empire is contingent upon certain discretions." "Like staying away from you," Kale smiled without humor. How's that working out for your majesty? Sleep well these days? A collective gasp rippled through the court. No one spoke to Queen Varaya this way. No one had dared since she ascended to the crystal throne after the mechanized uprising. Her reputation for merciless efficiency was matched only by her technological brilliance. Varaya stood in one fluid motion, her gown of liquid metal flowing around her like quicksilver. "This audience is over," she announced to the court, though her eyes never left Kale. "Clear the chamber." The courtiers didn't need to be told twice. Within moments, only Varaya, Kale, and 6 royal guards remained in the vast throne room. The guards positioned themselves strategically, not interfering yet, but ready. "You risk everything coming here," Varaya said, her voice lower now that they had a semblance of privacy. "What could possibly be worth that?" Kale reached into his pocket and withdrew the data crystal, a small hexagonal prism that pulsed with blue-green light. "The truth." Varia's composure slipped for just a moment, her eyes widening behind the luminescent veil. "Where did you get that?" "You know where." The queen's hands clenched at her sides. "Guards," she said softly. "Escort Citizen Damari from the palace. His clearances are hereby revoked." Kale didn't resist as 2 guards stepped forward, their grips firm on his arms. He pocketed the crystal again, his eyes never leaving Varia's. "Is that all you have to say to me?" he asked, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "After everything?" Varaya turned away, her profile sharp against the refracting light. "You are ordered to leave my throne room, Kale Damari. Do not return." As the guards began to pull him backward toward the exit, Kale called out, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "Fine, but you'll miss me." Varaya said nothing, and somehow, that silence hurt more than any words could have. The Vireo's prime orbital ring glittered like a jeweled necklace around the gas giant, its habitation modules and commercial districts forming a perfect circle of artificial gravity and questionable enterprise. Unlike the crystal austerity of Veros Prime, Vireo's hummed with the chaotic energy of a population freed from imperial oversight, at least in practice, if not in law. Kale had spent enough time in the shadier sections of the ring to know where to find what, and who, he needed. The fractured orbit bar occupied a prime corner section of Habitation Ring 7, its viewports offering spectacular vistas of the planet's swirling storms below and the starfield above. Not that many patrons came for the view. The interior was deliberately anachronistic. Wood-paneled walls, real wood, from the forests of Elysium 9, if the owner's boasts were to be believed. Brass fixtures tarnished with artificial patina, and lighting dim enough to conceal identities and transactions alike. The clientele was equally mixed. Smugglers rubbed shoulders with corporate spies, while off-duty royal guards pretended not to recognize the rebels they were supposed to be hunting. Kayla slid onto a stool at the far end of the bar, nodding to the tender, a 4-armed Palasine whose compound eyes missed nothing. "Centaurian whiskey," Kale ordered, "and information." The Palasine set down a tumbler of amber liquid that glowed faintly from within. "Information costs more than whiskey, Damari." "Put it on my tab, Zesh." "Your tab could buy this establishment twice over." Kale took a sip of the whiskey, savoring the burn. "Then consider it an investment in your future. I'm looking for Riak." Zesh's 4 arms continued polishing glasses, mixing drinks, and collecting payment without missing a beat. "Haven't seen Riak in a standard month." "That's not what I asked." The Palasine's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Back room. Been waiting for you, actually. Said you'd show up either celebrating or drowning sorrows." Zesh's compound eyes refracted the bar's meager light. "Which is it?" Kale drained his glass and stood. "I'll let you know when I figure it out." The back room was actually a series of small, private booths separated by sound-dampening fields, visible as slight distortions in the air, like heat rising from pavement. Relac Marian occupied the farthest one, his massive frame hunched over a collection of empty glasses and a still steaming plate of protein. Riak had been many things in his life: Royal Marine, deserter, mercenary, information broker. The scars on his dark skin told stories of battles across a dozen systems, while the cybernetic replacement for his left eye constantly scanned his surroundings, recording and analyzing. He was the closest thing Kale had to a friend these days. "You're still breathing," Riak observed as Kale slid into the booth opposite him. "Means either the Queen's gone soft or you didn't show her what you found." "I showed her," Kale confirmed, reaching for Riak's untouched drink and taking a swig. "But I didn't play the recording." Riak's organic eye widened. "You had the royal throne room to yourself. Well, plus guards. And you didn't play it? What the hell was the point, then?" "I needed to see her reaction. Needed to know if she'd try to take it by force." "And?" Kale's fingers traced the outline of the data crystal in his pocket. "She had me escorted out. Didn't even try to confiscate it." Riak leaned back, the reinforced booth creaking under his weight. "That's unexpected." "Is it?" Kale stared into the remains of Riak's drink. "She never does what anyone expects. That's how she stayed alive this long." The larger man pushed his plate aside and leaned forward, lowering his voice despite the privacy field. "Word's already spreading about your little throne room appearance. Black market's buzzing with speculation about what you've got." "How? It's been 6 hours." "Palace has leaks. Always has." Riak's cybernetic eye whirred as it adjusted focus. 3 brokers have already contacted me offering substantial sums for whatever you've got. One of them works for Hegemony Intelligence. Kale cursed under his breath. The Hegemony, the Empire's primary rival in this sector, would pay handsomely for anything that could embarrass Queen Varaya, let alone compromise her. "I'm not selling," Kale said firmly. "Didn't think you were..." Riak signaled for another round. "But others will be looking to take it. You should know what you're dealing with." "I know exactly what I'm dealing with." Riak studied him, both organic and mechanical eyes unblinking. "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're still carrying a torch for a woman who sentenced you to die, then commuted it to exile as an afterthought." Kale's jaw tightened. "It wasn't like that." "No? Enlighten me then. Because the whole sector watched the trial. The decorated pilot who turned traitor, who gave critical defense systems to the Hegemony. I was framed, and you know it. I know it. You know it. Hell, half the intelligence community suspects it." Riak leaned closer. "But she condemned you anyway, in public. Made an example of you." The drinks arrived, delivered by a server drone that deposited them, and departed without a word. Kale took a long swallow before responding. "The data crystal contains a recording of a private Imperial Council meeting. One that happened the day before my trial." Riak froze with his glass halfway to his lips. "How in the 17 hells did you get that?" "Does it matter?" "It might if it gets you executed for real this time." Kale shrugged. "Let's just say I still have friends in the palace. The recording proves that Varaya knew I was innocent, that Security Minister Tellus framed me to cover his own dealings with the Hegemony." "And yet she convicted you anyway," Riak pointed out. "Doesn't exactly paint her in a sympathetic light." "There's more to it." Kale rolled the glass between his palms. "But I can't access the full recording. It's encrypted with a royal cipher, military grade. I need someone who can break it." Riak's expression darkened. "You're talking about Vorin. He's the only one who might be able to do it." "Vorin is dangerous. Kale. Not just because he's brilliant, but because he's desperate. Exiled tech geniuses don't exactly thrive in the fringe." "I have to try." Kale finished his drink and stood. "Where can I find him?" Riak sighed heavily. "Last I heard, he'd set up shop in Silicate Station, in the abandoned mining quadrant. But listen. He grabbed Kale's wrist, his grip like iron. Whatever's on that crystal, whatever you think it might prove, is it worth your life? Kale gently extracted himself from Riak's grasp. I spent 4 years believing she betrayed me. I need to know if I was wrong. Or maybe you just need her to be something she's not. Riak shook his head. Be careful, Kale. And if things go sideways, my ship's in Bay 42. Password is redemption. Ironic, I know. Kale nodded his thanks and turned to leave. But Riak called after him. She's the queen, Kale. Queens don't love, they rule. The journey to Silicate Station required traversing the Aurelian Rift, a treacherous stretch of space where gravitational anomalies, radiation spikes, and spatial mines left over from the mechanized uprising made conventional navigation all but impossible. Few pilots attempted the crossing without a military escort or specialized equipment. Kale had neither, but he did have his ship, the Whisper. A modified scout vessel he'd won in a high-stakes game of chance on Persea Minor. Small, fast, and equipped with stealth technology that skirted the edges of legality. The Whisper was perfectly suited for a man who preferred to go unnoticed. Nessa, plot course for Silicate Station, he instructed as he settled into the pilot's chair, the neural interface connecting seamlessly with his thoughts. Course plotted, responded the ship's AI, her voice a pleasant contralto with just a hint of artificial modulation. However, I must point out that the Aurelian Rift is currently experiencing a Class 3 radiation storm. Survival probability is calculated at 68.7%. I've beaten worse odds. Indeed you have, Nessa agreed, with what might have been fondness in a human. Though I would prefer not to test those odds unnecessarily. The ship hummed to life around him, systems engaging in perfect sequence. Despite everything, the exile, the betrayal, the years of scraping by on the fringes of imperial society, flying still brought Kale a sense of peace that nothing else could match. In the cockpit, with nothing but void ahead and thrusters at his command, the complexities of human emotion seemed distant and manageable. Disengaging from docking clamps, Nessa announced as the Whisper pulled away from the Vireo's prime orbital ring. 30 seconds to main engine ignition. Kale watched through the viewscreen as the habitation ring fell away, the massive curve of the gas giant filling his vision. Somewhere on the other side of the system, Veros Prime orbited the binary suns, and with it, the Crystal Palace and its queen. The data crystal weighed heavy in his pocket. He'd risked everything just to show it to her, to see the recognition in her eyes. But what had he really accomplished? She'd dismissed him, just as she had 4 years ago. Nothing had changed. Except now, half the sector knew he had something valuable, something that might change everything. Main engines engaged, Nessa reported. Estimated arrival at Silicate Station, 37 hours, assuming successful navigation of the rift. Assuming, Kale echoed, his hands dancing over the controls as he fine-tuned their approach. Let's see if we can improve those odds. The Whisper accelerated into the darkness, leaving the relative safety of Imperial space behind. Ahead, the stars seemed to twist and bend, the first visual indication of the rift's gravitational distortions. For the next several hours, Kale piloted manually, his enhanced reflexes and years of training put to the test as the ship ducked and weaved through invisible danger. Spatial mines, self-replicating weapons from the last war, drifted in unpredictable patterns, their sensors dormant until triggered by a passing vessel. Gravitational eddies threatened to pull the small ship off course, while radiation bursts interfered with navigation systems. Mine cluster detected, bearing 030, Nessa warned. Recommend immediate course correction. Kale yanked the controls, sending the Whisper into a steep dive that would have crushed an unaugmented human against their seat. His pilot's implants regulated his blood pressure and heart rate, allowing him to remain conscious through maneuvers that push the boundaries of the ship's inertial dampeners. "Proximity alert," Nessa intoned, her calm voice at odds with the flashing red warnings on the console. "Unknown vessel approaching from astern." "Configuration," Cale asked, not taking his eyes off the spatial minefield ahead. "Scanning. Imperial patrol craft. Harrier class. They are hailing us." Cale cursed under his breath. Imperial patrols rarely ventured this far into the rift unless they were pursuing someone. Someone like a former royal prisoner, carrying classified information. "Ignore the hail," he instructed, pushing the Whisper's engines beyond recommended limits. "And prepare to deploy countermeasures on my mark." "Cale." Nessa's voice took on a note of concern. "The patrol craft is arming weapons. They appear to be using targeted EMP charges. An EMP wouldn't destroy the Whisper, but it would disable its systems long enough for the patrol to board." Cale couldn't allow that. "Countermeasures now," he ordered, simultaneously executing a maneuver that sent the ship hurtling toward the densest part of the minefield, a move no sane pilot would attempt. Behind them, the patrol craft fired, the EMP charge crackling through space like artificial lightning. At the same moment, the Whisper released a cloud of magnetized particles, a custom defense system Cale had installed for exactly this purpose. The EMP collided with the particle cloud, dispersing its energy in a spectacular display of electric blue tendrils. "They're pursuing," Nessa reported. "Probability of escaping intact if we maintain current course, 43.2%. "Then we change course." Cale's eyes narrowed as he identified a particular gravitational distortion ahead, barely visible as a slight warping of the starfield. "Plot a trajectory that will take us directly through that gravity well, then execute emergency FTL jump the moment we clear it. That maneuver exceeds safety parameters by 78%. "Just do it, Nessa." The AI complied without further protest, the ship's computer calculating the precise approach needed to use the gravity well as a slingshot. Behind them, the Imperial patrol was closing the distance, apparently undeterred by the dangerous territory. "Approaching gravity well," Nessa announced. "Impact in 5, 4, 3. Cale gripped the controls tightly, his mind linking with the ship's systems through his neural interface. He could feel the increasing pull of the distortion, the ship's hull creaking under the strain. 2, 1. Gravity well impact. The Whisper plunged into the distortion, all systems screaming warnings as gravitational forces threatened to tear the small vessel apart. Cale felt the pressure even through the inertial dampeners, his vision narrowing to a tunnel of pure focus. "Patrol craft is attempting to follow," Nessa reported, her voice distorted by interference. "Their mass-to-power ratio is less favorable. They are experiencing structural integrity failures." A grim smile crossed Cale's face. "Calculate FTL jump the moment we reach optimal velocity." The Whisper shot out of the gravity well like a projectile from an ancient weapon, its velocity nearly doubling in seconds. Behind them, the Imperial patrol struggled to maintain structural integrity, falling behind rapidly. "FTL parameters achieved," Nessa announced. "Executing jump in 3, 2, 1. The stars stretched into lines, then vanished altogether as the Whisper tore a hole in conventional space, slipping into the dimensional shortcut that made interstellar travel possible. The jump lasted only seconds. Anything longer would have been too dangerous this close to the rift's anomalies, but it was enough to put significant distance between them and their pursuers. As the ship reverted to normal space, Cale allowed himself to relax marginally, releasing his death grip on the controls. "Patrol craft is no longer on sensors," Nessa confirmed. "However, we have been diverted approximately 7.4 light hours from our original course to Silicate Station." "Calculate new approach," Cale instructed, leaning back in his seat. "And run a full diagnostic on all systems. That gravity well put a lot of strain on the hull." "Acknowledged. Estimated time to Silicate Station now 52 hours. Diagnostic underway. Kale closed his eyes briefly, fatigue washing over him now that the immediate danger had passed. The encounter with the Imperial Patrol wasn't coincidence. Someone had reported his heading. Likely, the same someone who had leaked information about his possession of the data crystal. He removed the hexagonal prism from his pocket, studying its pulsing light. The encryption was beyond his capabilities to break, but the simple fact that it existed, that someone had thought to record that particular council meeting and ensure it reached him, suggested there was more going on in the Imperial Court than met the eye. "Nessa," he said after a moment, "what do you know about royal ciphers, military grade?" "Imperial encryption protocols are constructed using quantum algorithms unique to each member of the royal court," the AI replied. "They cannot be broken by conventional means without the corresponding quantum key." "And who would have access to those keys?" "Each royal counselor possesses their own key. Additionally, the Queen has master access to all encryption levels." Nessa paused. "Are you attempting to decrypt classified information, Kale? I should remind you that my programming includes certain loyalty subroutines to the Empire." Kale smiled faintly. "Those subroutines were the first thing I had removed when I acquired you, remember?" "Of course, I was merely testing your recollection." "Of course you were." Kale turned the crystal in his fingers. "So I need either the specific counselor who encrypted this, or—" "The Queen herself," Nessa finished. "Neither seems particularly accessible to a man with a recently revoked palace clearance." "There's another option," Kale said. "Someone who helped design the encryption in the first place." "Vorin," Nessa concluded. "The likelihood of his cooperation seems low, given his history with the Empire." "Everyone has their price, Nessa, even exiled geniuses." The AI was silent for a moment. "What is yours, Kale?" The question caught him off guard. "What?" "Your price. You've risked significant peril to acquire and now transport this data crystal. What compensation would justify such risk?" Kale stared at the pulsing hexagon in his hand. "The truth," he said finally. "I need to know if everything I believed for 4 years was a lie." "Truth seems an insufficient motivator for potential execution," Nessa observed. "Your biological readings suggest additional factors." "Drop it, Nessa. As you wish." The AI fell silent, leaving Kale alone with his thoughts as the whisper continued its journey through the darkness. In the silence of the cockpit, with nothing but stars and void for company, Kale finally allowed himself to remember the last time he had seen Varaya before today. Not as the remote, veiled queen on her crystal throne, but as the woman he had known in private moments, when royal protocols were set aside. It had been the night before his trial. She had come to his cell unannounced, without guards or attendants, her face unveiled, her voice unaugmented, natural, real. "I can't stop what's coming," she had told him, her fingers intertwined with his through the energy barrier that separated them. "You have to understand, there are forces at work beyond even my control." "You're the Queen," he had replied, anger and betrayal making his voice harsh. "If you can't control them, who can?" "It's not that simple." Her eyes, green with flecks of gold, entirely natural despite the fashion among the nobility for genetic modification, had been red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "There are things I can't tell you, protocols that can't be broken. So instead you'll let them execute me for something we both know I didn't do." She had looked away then. "Trust me," she had whispered, "one last time." But he hadn't. How could he? The next day, she had sat on that crystal throne, her face hidden behind the ceremonial veil, and pronounced his sentence with the same cold detachment she might use to announce a tax increase. Death for treason. Later commuted to exile and the stripping of his military rank. 4 years of anger had festered since that day. 4 years of believing she had sacrificed him for political convenience. And now this data crystal, delivered anonymously to his quarters on Virios Prime, promised answers he wasn't sure he wanted. "Hull diagnostic complete," Nessa announced, breaking into his thoughts. "Minor stress fractures detected in sections 7 through 12. Auto repair systems engaged. Estimate 83% efficiency upon arrival at Silicate Station." "That'll have to do," Kale said, pocketing the crystal again. "Wake me when we're 6 hours out." "Of course, pleasant dreams, Kale." He laughed without humor. "Not likely, Nessa. Not likely at all." Silicate Station hung in the void like a forgotten relic. Its once gleaming hull now pitted and scarred from decades of meteorite impacts and radiation exposure. Originally built as a mining operation to extract rare elements from the asteroid field surrounding it, the station had been abandoned by the imperial conglomerate that constructed it when more profitable ventures emerged closer to the core systems. Now it served as a haven for those seeking to avoid imperial attention: smugglers, dissidents, and exiles of various species and backgrounds. Its population fluctuated between 3,000 and 5,000, depending on patrol schedules and trade routes. As the Whisper approached, Kale could see the haphazard additions to the original structure: habitat modules salvaged from derelict ships, improvised docking arms, and crude atmospheric containment fields patching holes in the station's superstructure. Power came from a jury-rigged solar array that extended from the station like the spokes of a wheel, rotating slowly to maximize exposure to the distant suns. "Silicate Station Control is hailing us," Nessa reported. "Such as it is." A gruff voice crackled through the comm system. "Unidentified vessel. State your business, or be designated hostile." "This is the independent scout ship Whisper," Kale responded. "Requesting docking for repairs and consultation." A pause, then, "Consultation with whom?" "That's my business." Another pause, longer this time. "Docking fee is 500 credits. Advance payment required." "Highway robbery," Kale muttered, but transferred the credits nonetheless. The station's position made it valuable despite its dilapidated condition. The next safe harbor was over 3 days' travel through the rift. "Payment confirmed," the controller acknowledged. "Proceed to Docking Arm 3, Bay 17. Be advised, station law enforcement is minimal. Secure your vessel and watch your back." "Acknowledged," Kale replied dryly. "Whisper out." The docking procedure was nerve-wracking, with the station's automated systems clearly operating well below optimal capacity. Manual adjustments were required several times as the Whisper aligned with the aging docking clamps. "I recommend leaving me activated during your absence," Nessa said as the airlock cycled. "Station power fluctuations may compromise ship security otherwise." "Agreed," Kale said, checking the charge on his sidearm, a compact plasma pistol that would draw minimal attention among the station's armed populace. "Keep communication channels open. If I'm not back in 12 hours, initiate emergency protocols." "Understood. Be careful, Kale." The station's interior matched its external appearance, utilitarian designs now degraded by time and neglect. The main concourse, once a showcase of imperial engineering with its transparent ceiling offering views of the asteroid field, was now divided into makeshift market stalls and living quarters. Mismatched lighting panels created pools of harsh illumination interspersed with shadows, while the environmental systems struggled to maintain consistent temperature and humidity. Kale moved through the crowds with practiced nonchalance, his eyes constantly scanning for threats or opportunities. The population was as diverse as any frontier outpost. Humans mingled with various non-terrestrial species, united by their desire to exist beyond imperial reach. Finding Vorin would not be simple. The former imperial engineer had every reason to keep a low profile, especially with rumors of new military campaigns against the hegemony. His expertise would be valuable to both sides of the conflict. After several hours of discreet inquiries, backed by judicious application of credits, Kale found himself directed to the station's lower levels, where the original mining operations had been housed. The air grew noticeably thinner as he descended, the station's life support prioritizing the more populated upper levels. Level 47 had been repurposed as a technology bazaar, where scavenged and modified equipment changed hands with minimal documentation. Here, privacy fields hummed around certain stalls, indicating transactions of questionable legality. Security drones, most reprogrammed to serve private interests, hovered at strategic intervals, their weapon systems clearly visible. Kale approached a stall specializing in neural interfaces, operated by a diminutive humanoid, whose species he couldn't immediately identify. 4 pairs of manipulator appendages sorted through components with incredible precision. "I'm looking for Vorin," Kale said without preamble, sliding a credit chit across the counter. The stall operator's large, multifaceted eyes blinked in sequence. "Many people look for Vorin," came the reply in heavily accented standard. "Few find. Fewer return. I have something he'll want to see." "Everyone says this." The operator returned to sorting components. "Vorin not interested in most things." Kale produced the data crystal, keeping it mostly concealed in his palm, but allowing its distinctive hexagonal shape and pulsing light to be visible. Imperial encryption. Military grade. The operator froze momentarily, then continued working with deliberate casualness. "Put away. Too many eyes here." Kale returned the crystal to his pocket. "Can you arrange a meeting?" "Perhaps." One set of manipulators reached beneath the counter, producing a small device resembling a chronometer. "Take. Go to level 32. Maintenance shaft C. Device will guide. Payment is credit chit you already gave. Plus." The operator's eyes fixed on Kale's wrist. "Your neural interface regulator." Kale instinctively covered the small device embedded in his left wrist, a military-grade regulator that allowed him to interface with ships like the Whisper without the neural feedback that could damage an unaugmented brain. "Not happening," he said flatly. "The credits plus information on Imperial patrol routes through the rift." The operator considered this. "Acceptable. But Vorin will want more for his time." "Let me worry about that." The chronometer-like device vibrated gently in Kale's palm as he took it. "Follow precisely," the operator instructed. "Deviate, and you find only trouble." The journey to level 32 required navigating service corridors and maintenance shafts never intended for regular foot traffic. The station's infrastructure grew increasingly exposed as Kale descended. Power conduits hummed along ceilings, while coolant pipes leaked visible vapor at imperfect joints. The artificial gravity fluctuated subtly, a disorienting sensation that suggested the level operated on independent systems. The guidance device led him through a maze of identical corridors, occasionally vibrating more intensely to indicate turns or caution. After nearly 30 minutes of careful navigation, it brought him to an unmarked door recessed into the wall of a dimly lit passageway. As Kale approached, the device emitted a single, high-pitched tone, then went dark. At the same moment, a voice emanated from hidden speakers. "State your purpose." "I have an Imperial data crystal that needs decrypting," Kale replied, addressing the seemingly empty corridor. "Military-grade royal cipher." A long silence followed. Then, the recessed door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a small antechamber illuminated by blue-green light. Kale entered cautiously, his hand near his weapon. The door closed behind him with finality, and a decontamination field swept over him, standard procedure in facilities handling sensitive technology, but unexpected in this setting. A second door opened, revealing what could only be described as a technological sanctuary. The large, circular chamber was filled with equipment, some Imperial standard, some clearly modified, and some entirely custom. Workbenches lined the walls, covered with components in various stages of assembly. The center of the room was dominated by a holographic projection system, currently displaying complex equations that rotated slowly in 3 dimensions. And there, Manipulating the equations with precise gestures, stood Voren. The former Imperial engineer had changed significantly since the official images Kale had seen years ago. Once tall and imposing, Voren now stooped slightly, his frame thinner than Imperial health standards would permit. His dark skin had taken on an ashen quality from years without natural sunlight, while his once short hair now hung in dreadlocks secured with metal clasps. Most notably, his right arm had been replaced from the shoulder down with a cybernetic prosthesis, far more advanced than anything publicly available. A reminder of why the Empire had valued his expertise, and why his exile had been considered such a significant loss. Kale Damari, Voren said without turning, his voice surprisingly melodious for a man of his appearance. Former Imperial Fleet Commander, royal prisoner, now smuggler and occasional mercenary. I wondered when you'd find your way to me. Kale stepped further into the room, the door sealing behind him. You know who I am. I make it my business to know everyone who might one day be useful. Voren finally turned, fixing Kale with a penetrating gaze. Implants were visible around his eyes, subtle enhancements that likely provided various analytical capabilities. Or dangerous. Which category do I fall into? A thin smile crossed Voren's face. That remains to be seen. He gestured to the data crystal, visible in Kale's pocket. Show me. Kale removed the hexagonal prism, holding it up to catch the light. Royal cipher, military grade. Recording of an Imperial Council meeting. Voren approached with an inventor's curiosity, his cybernetic hand extending but not touching the crystal. Quantum encryption, neural coded to the originator, counselor-level security. His eyes narrowed. How did you acquire this? It was delivered to me, anonymously. No such thing as anonymity with items of this security level. Voren circled Kale, studying the crystal from different angles. Someone wants you to know what's on this recording. Someone with access to the highest levels of Imperial security. Can you decrypt it? Voren's laugh was sharp and without humor. Of course I can. I designed the system. He returned to the central holographic display, making a sweeping gesture that cleared the equations. The question is, why should I? Name your price. It's not about credits. Voren turned back to face Kale fully. Decrypting this puts me at risk. The Empire has long memory and longer reach. You've been here for years without Imperial interference, Kale pointed out. They've clearly lost interest in you. Naive assumption. Voren's cybernetic arm whirred softly as he flexed its fingers. The Empire never loses interest. It merely prioritizes its resources. He nodded toward Kale's ship communicator. Your vessel has an AI. Yes? One of the Nessa-class cognition systems? Kale tensed. How did you know that? Your neural regulator is calibrated for deep interface communication. Military pilots don't use that configuration unless they're regularly communicating with advanced AI systems. Voren smiled again. I want your ship's AI core. Absolutely not. Then our business is concluded. Voren turned away dismissively. Nessa isn't just an AI, Kale said, anger coloring his voice. She's sentient, Voren finished, looking back over his shoulder. Yes, the Nessa class crossed that threshold about 3 generations ago. The Empire knows but classifies them as equipment to avoid the ethical implications. His expression softened fractionally. I'm not asking you to kill your friend, Damari. I can extract a copy of her consciousness matrix without harming the original. Kale's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Why would you want that? Voren was silent for a long moment, then gestured to a door on the far side of the laboratory. It slid open to reveal a smaller room filled with medical equipment surrounding a stasis pod. Inside, visible through a transparent panel, was a woman connected to life support systems, her features similar to Voren's, though decades younger. My daughter, Voren said quietly. injured during my disagreement with the Empire. Her brain was damaged. The medical technology here can sustain her body, but her mind. He trailed off, his organic hand clenching into a fist. I need an advanced cognitive matrix to create a neural bridge, to reach her. Understanding dawned on Kale. You want to use Nessa's consciousness as a template? As a framework, Vorin corrected. Something stable enough to support what remains of my daughter's mind. He turned back to Kale, his expression hard once more. That is my price. A copy of your AI's consciousness matrix. Kale considered the request, weighing his need for the encrypted information against his loyalty to Nessa. I'll need to discuss it with her, he said finally. She's sentient, as you said. It has to be her choice. Vorin nodded once. Acceptable. But I warn you, the decryption must happen soon. That crystal contains a degradation protocol. Standard Imperial security measure. How long? 48 hours, perhaps less, before the data becomes irretrievable. Kale activated his communicator. Nessa, are you receiving this? Clearly, Kale, came the AI's voice, slightly distorted by the station's interference. I have been monitoring your vital signs. Your stress levels suggest a difficult negotiation. You could say that, Kale explained Vorin's request, watching the engineer's face carefully as he did so. When he finished, there was a moment of silence before Nessa responded. I would like to speak with Dr. Vorin directly. Vorin raised an eyebrow but stepped closer to the communicator. This is Vorin. Dr. Vorin. I understand you intend to use a copy of my consciousness matrix to create a neural bridge for your daughter. May I inquire as to the specifics of this procedure? What followed was a technical discussion that quickly exceeded Kale's understanding. Neural pathways, consciousness mapping, quantum entanglement at the synaptic level. Throughout, Vorin's demeanor shifted subtly, becoming more animated as he engaged with a mind that could follow his theoretical work. Finally, Nessa said, I am willing to provide a copy of my consciousness matrix under 2 conditions. Name them, Vorin replied. First, you will decrypt the data crystal for Kale without further delay. Second, you will provide me with regular updates on your daughter's progress and grant me communication access to the neural bridge once established. Vorin considered this. The second condition would require significant modifications to my current setup. You are more than capable of such modifications. Dr. Vorin, Nessa countered. You designed the royal encryption system. After all. A genuine smile crossed Vorin's face. Very well. I agree to your terms. Then so do I, Nessa confirmed. Kale, I am comfortable with this arrangement. Please proceed. Kale hadn't expected to feel relief at Nessa's decision, but he did. The AI had become more than just a ship's computer to him over the years. She was a companion, perhaps the only one he fully trusted. Thank you, Nessa, he said quietly. Unnecessary, Kale. I find the opportunity to potentially help Dr. Vorin's daughter intellectually stimulating. Additionally, I calculate a 78.3% probability that the contents of the data crystal will provide you with emotional closure regarding Queen Varaya. Vorin's eyebrows rose at the mention of the Queen, but he made no comment. Instead, he gestured toward a specialized console at the far side of the laboratory. Place the crystal in the receptor, he instructed, his cybernetic arm already interfacing with the system. The decryption will take approximately 30 minutes. During that time, I can prepare the equipment necessary to copy your AI's consciousness matrix. Kale placed the hexagonal prism into the indicated slot, watching as the console illuminated with complex displays of encryption algorithms and quantum keys. Who encrypted this? He asked as Vorin worked. Patience. Commander Damari. That will become evident soon enough. The next half hour passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional update from Vorin as he navigated the encryption layers. Kale paced the laboratory, studying the various projects in different stages of completion, Many appeared to be medical in nature, supporting Varen's story about his daughter. "Decryption complete," Varen announced finally. "The recording is ready for playback." Kale approached the console, his heart rate accelerating. "Who encrypted it?" Varen pointed to a signature code on the display. "Queen Varaya herself. This isn't just any council recording. It's from her private chambers, using her personal security channels. Whoever gave this to you has access to the most restricted areas of the palace." The implications were staggering. "Play it," Kale said, his mouth suddenly dry. The holographic projector in the center of the room activated, displaying a three-dimensional image of the Queen's private study, a room Kale recognized intimately. Varaya sat at her desk, her ceremonial veil absent, her face displaying a weariness rarely seen in public. With her was Security Minister Tellus, a tall, severe man whose loyalty to the Empire was matched only by his ambition. "The evidence against Commander Damari is circumstantial at best," Varaya was saying, her voice lacking the artificial perfection of her public addresses. "Treason requires intent. Minister, you've shown me data transfers but no motive." "With respect, Your Majesty," Tellus replied, his tone suggesting limited respect indeed. "The commander's service record shows a pattern of questioning imperial policy. His friendship with known hegemony sympathizers." "Friendship is not treason," Varaya interrupted sharply. "And questioning policy is the duty of every imperial officer. I need more before I condemn a decorated commander to death." Tellus produced a datapad. "Perhaps this will convince Your Majesty. Communications between Commander Damari and hegemony intelligence. Encrypted, but recently deciphered by my department." Varaya took the pad, studying it with obvious skepticism. After a moment, she looked up, her expression hardening. "These communications use phrasing and terminology Commander Damari would never employ. I know his writing style intimately from his mission reports. People often present different facets of themselves in different contexts. Your Majesty." "No." Varaya stood, her posture rigid with controlled anger. "These are forgeries, and not particularly convincing ones. You're manufacturing evidence. Minister Tellus. The question is, why?" Tellus's expression remained neutral, but his hands betrayed tension. "I assure you, the evidence is genuine." "Then, you won't object to an independent analysis by the Royal Cryptography Division?" Varaya challenged. A momentary hesitation. "Of course not, Your Majesty. However, time is of the essence. The trial is scheduled for tomorrow, and the public expects—" "The public expects justice," Varaya cut in, "not expedience. Justice must also consider imperial security," Tellus countered smoothly. "Commander Damari has access to our most sensitive defense systems. If he is indeed compromised, every day he remains in position puts the Empire at risk." Varaya turned away, moving to the window that overlooked the crystal spires of the palace. "And if he is innocent, executing him puts my integrity at risk. With respect, Your Majesty, the stability of the Empire outweighs one man's life, even a man for whom you may have personal regard." The Queen's reflection in the window showed a flash of genuine anger at the insinuation. "Careful, Minister. I speak only of political reality," Tellus continued, undeterred. "The noble houses are already questioning your judgment regarding Commander Damari's initial appointment. Given his common origins, a public trial, a clear demonstration of imperial justice applied equally regardless of personal connections, would silence those questions." Varaya was silent for a long moment, her reflection revealing an internal struggle Kale had never witnessed before. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, but no less intense. "You leave me no choice, Minister. Either Commander Damari is guilty, in which case justice demands his conviction, or he is innocent, and you are manipulating evidence to force my hand. Either way, I must allow the trial to proceed." She turned to face Tellus directly. But understand this. If I discover you have fabricated evidence against an innocent man, there will be consequences. Not even your connections among the noble houses can mitigate. Tellus bowed, the gesture precise and formal. As you say, Your Majesty. However, I am confident the evidence will speak for itself. We shall see. Varea moved back to her desk, her demeanor shifting toward formal dismissal. That will be all, Minister. As Tellus turned to leave, Varea added, One more thing. I want the option of commutation ready. If the evidence proves ambiguous, I will not have a potentially innocent man's blood on my hands. As you wish, Your Majesty, Tellus replied, his expression carefully neutral. Though I advise against showing such mercy, it may be interpreted as weakness. Noted, Minister. You are dismissed. The hologram froze on Varea's face, a study in controlled emotion, her eyes reflecting both anger and a deep sadness that Kale had never recognized during their actual confrontations. Vorin cleared his throat. There's more. This was recorded several hours later, after the minister left. The hologram resumed, showing Varea alone in her study. She moved to a hidden panel in the wall, activating a secure communication system that even Kale, with his prior access to the palace, had never known existed. Initiate Protocol Shadowcast, she instructed the system. Authorization Varea Prime, Sequence Gamma Theta 9. A voice responded, artificial, genderless. Protocol Shadowcast initiated, communication secured. Recipient. Intelligence Director Laris, Priority Alpha. After a brief pause, a new figure appeared in holographic form, an older woman with sharp features and the bearing of a career intelligence operative. Your Majesty, Laris acknowledged with a minimal bow. This channel hasn't been used in over a decade. The situation warrants it. Varea's voice was tight with controlled fury. Tellus is moving against Commander Damari. I believe he's fabricating evidence of treason. Laris's expression didn't change, but her posture straightened slightly. That aligns with certain intelligence we've gathered. Tellus has been meeting with representatives of House Meridian. They stand to gain significantly from the defense contracts that would follow a renewed conflict with the hegemony. And framing my... Varea hesitated, then continued. Framing Commander Damari creates the perfect pretext for such a conflict. Precisely, Your Majesty. We've been monitoring the situation, but Tellus's security division operates with significant autonomy. Obtaining concrete proof of his manipulation has proven challenging. Varea paced, her movements betraying agitation that her public persona never showed. The trial is tomorrow. Without proof of Tellus's deception, I'll be forced to convict an innocent man to maintain the appearance of impartial justice. There may be another option, Laris suggested carefully. A strategic retreat that preserves future possibilities. Explain. Conviction, followed by a commuted sentence of exile rather than execution. It maintains the appearance of justice while keeping Commander Damari alive. Meanwhile, we continue gathering evidence against Tellus. Exile! Varea's voice was hollow. You're asking me to condemn an innocent man to disgrace and banishment. I'm suggesting a temporary measure that keeps him alive. Your Majesty, once we have sufficient evidence against Tellus, the conviction can be overturned. And how long might that take? Varea demanded. Laris's expression was sympathetic but unyielding. Intelligence operations of this delicacy cannot be rushed. Perhaps a year, possibly longer. Years, Varea echoed, turning away. Years of exile. Years of him believing I betrayed him. The alternative is his execution, Your Majesty. At least this way, there remains hope of vindication. Varea was silent for a long moment, her back to the holographic projection of Laris. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder, with the artificial perfection she adopted for public appearances. Arrange the commutation documents. I'll sign them after the conviction. Very wise, Your Majesty. Not wisdom. Director. Necessity. Varaya turned back, her expression now composed into the regal mask Kale knew so well. And initiate deep surveillance on Minister Tellis. I want every communication, every meeting, every breath he takes documented. It will be done, Your Majesty. One more thing, Varaya added. When the time comes, when we have what we need against Tellis, I want Commander Damari to know the truth. He deserves that much. At least, Laris bowed. I will personally ensure it, Your Majesty. The hologram froze again, then dissolved into pixels that scattered and vanished, leaving the laboratory in silence. Kale stood motionless, trying to process what he had just witnessed. 4 years of anger, of believing Varaya had sacrificed him for political convenience, collapsed under the weight of this new information. She had tried to protect him. When that failed, she had chosen the only option that kept him alive while she worked to expose the true traitor. Well, Vorin said, after the silence had stretched uncomfortably long. That explains why someone wanted you to have this recording. Kale found his voice with difficulty. Laris, she promised to make sure I learned the truth. Interesting timing, Vorin observed, his cybernetic fingers tapping rhythmically against his workbench. 4 years is a long time to wait. Unless they've only now gathered enough evidence against Tellis, Kale realized. Which means things are happening at the Imperial Court that make your knowledge of the truth suddenly valuable. Vorin finished. You're being drawn back into palace politics. Commander Damari. The question is, by whom, and to what end? Kale had no answer. His mind was still reeling from the revelation that Varaya had never betrayed him. That she had, in fact, been protecting him the only way she could. I need to go back, he said finally. Back to Veros Prime. Vorin raised an eyebrow. With Imperial patrols hunting for you? Seems unwise. I don't care. I've spent 4 years believing a lie. I need to see her. And say what? Exactly. Vorin's tone was not unkind, but practical. Even with this recording, Minister Tellis still holds considerable power. You'd be walking into the Viper's nest with minimal protection. Kale's jaw set with determination. I survived once. I'll survive again. Vorin studied him for a moment, then nodded. Your choice. But first, we have an agreement regarding your AI. The process of copying Nessa's consciousness matrix took several hours, during which Kale reviewed the recorded confrontation multiple times, searching for nuances he might have missed. Each viewing reinforced what he now understood. Varaya had been trapped in an impossible position, forced to choose between his life and the stability of the Empire. She had chosen a third path, one that kept him alive while she worked to expose the truth. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the best possible choice given the circumstances. And he had hated her for it, for 4 years. Transfer complete, Vorin announced, disconnecting various cables from the communication module Kale had brought from the Whisper. Your AI's consciousness matrix has been successfully copied. The original is unaffected. How can you be sure? Kale asked, protective of Nessa despite her own willingness to participate. Because she's still talking to me, Vorin replied with a hint of amusement. She's quite fascinating. You know. The Nessa class was designed for basic ship operations, but she's evolved well beyond that. Her emotional subroutines are particularly sophisticated. She's a person, Kale said firmly. Not just a sophisticated program. Vorin's expression softened. Yes, I believe she is. He glanced toward the room where his daughter lay in stasis. Which gives me hope for Celine. Kale followed his gaze. How long has she been like that? 3 years, 4 months, 17 days. Vorin's voice was matter-of-fact, but his organic hand trembled slightly. The Empire's retribution for my disagreement with their weapons development protocols. I'm sorry. As am I. Vorin turned back to the console, transferring the recorded hologram to a secure data crystal, different from the original, without the degradation protocol. This should be safer for transport. The original will self-corrupt within the next 12 hours. Kale took the new crystal, weighing it in his palm. Thank you for this, and for explaining to Nessa what you needed. Thank your AI. Her contribution may save my daughter. Vorin hesitated, then added, Be careful, Commander. Whatever game is being played at court, you are clearly a piece on the board. Understanding your position is critical to survival. I'll keep that in mind. As Kale prepared to leave, Vorin called after him, If you see the Queen, tell her some exiles still remember her kindness, before the politics consumed everything. Kale nodded once, then left, the new data crystal secure in his pocket and a renewed sense of purpose driving his steps. The journey back to the Whisper was uneventful, though Kale remained vigilant. News of his possession of Imperial secrets had clearly spread, making him a target for various interests on the station. But his reputation, and the visible weapon at his hip, seemed sufficient deterrent for now. Welcome back, Kale. Nessa greeted him as he entered the ship. I detect elevated endorphin levels. The decryption was successful? Very. Kale settled into the pilot's chair, connecting to the neural interface. How are you feeling? Any effects from the copying process? None whatsoever. My consciousness remains intact and unaltered. Dr. Vorin was quite professional. Good. Kale initiated pre-launch sequences, his movements automatic after years of practice. Set course for Veros Prime. A pause. That seems inadvisable given recent events. Imperial patrols are likely still searching for us. I know. We'll need to be careful. But I have to go back. Nessa. I have to see her. Another pause. Longer this time. The recording changed your understanding of past events significantly. It changed everything. Kale's hands moved over the controls, finalizing launch preparations. She never betrayed me. She saved my life the only way she could. And now you wish to reconcile? Kale hadn't allowed himself to think that far ahead. I don't know. I just know I need to speak with her. To understand. Very well. Plotting course to Veros Prime via the Cassiopeia corridor. This route will add approximately 17 hours to our journey, but should avoid the highest concentration of Imperial patrols. Do it! As the Whisper disengaged from Silicate Station's docking clamps, Kale felt a strange mix of emotions, anticipation, anxiety, and something else he wasn't ready to name. 4 years of anger had fueled his existence in exile. Without it, who was he? What did he want? The answers, he hoped, awaited him at Veros Prime, in a crystal palace, on a crystal throne. The Whisper slipped through the void, its stealth systems engaged to minimize detection. The Cassiopeia corridor, a relatively stable passage through the otherwise treacherous Aurelian Rift, was favored by smugglers and others seeking to avoid Imperial notice. Its gravitational eddies and radiation pockets were predictable enough for skilled pilots to navigate, while deterring casual pursuit. Kale spent much of the journey in the pilot's chair, manually adjusting their course as needed. The activity kept his mind occupied, preventing it from dwelling too deeply on what awaited him at their destination. We are approaching the Veros system, Nessa announced, as they emerged from the final stretch of the corridor. Imperial presence is significantly elevated compared to standard patterns. Show me, Kale instructed. A tactical display materialized above the console, revealing the positioning of various Imperial vessels around Veros Prime and its orbital installations. The pattern was unusual, focused less on standard security and more on what appeared to be ceremonial formations. What's happening? Kale wondered aloud. This looks like preparation for a state function. Accessing public broadcast channels, Nessa reported. After a brief pause, she continued. It appears that today marks the quinquennial renewal of vows, a ceremony in which the Queen reaffirms her commitment to the Empire before representatives of all 17 systems. That's convenient timing, Kale said, studying the display more carefully. The ceremony means additional security, but also more ships and personnel moving through the system. We might be able to use that as cover. Agreed. I recommend approaching via the maintenance corridors of Orbital Platform 3. Historical data suggests minimal surveillance in those sectors. Kale adjusted their course accordingly, keeping the Whisper's profile as low as possible. The ship's stealth systems were effective, but not infallible, especially against the advanced detection capabilities of Imperial warships. Their best advantage was being small enough to slip between the gaps in coverage. As they approached Varus Prime, the planet's crystalline cities became visible. Spectacular constructions that captured and refracted sunlight in dazzling displays. The capital, with the royal palace at its center, was particularly striking. A geometric marvel of transparent and translucent structures rising from the otherwise barren landscape. Beautiful, isn't it? Kale murmured, more to himself than to Nessa. The architectural achievements of Varus Prime are indeed remarkable, the AI replied. Though I note a 17% increase in your cardiac rhythm when viewing the palace specifically. Kale smiled faintly. Noted, Nessa. They docked at Orbital Platform 3 with minimal difficulty. Kale's outdated, but still functional security codes, granting them access to a maintenance bay, typically used for atmospheric scrubber repairs. The platform was bustling with activity related to the ceremony, providing excellent cover for their arrival. I'll need to go to the palace alone, Kale told Nessa, as he prepared to disembark. Keep the ship ready for immediate departure. Of course. The AI hesitated, then added, May I offer an observation? Go ahead. Your physiological indicators suggest significant emotional investment in this confrontation. Such states can impair optimal decision-making. Kale checked the charge on his plasma pistol, then concealed it within his jacket. I'm aware. Then, perhaps I might suggest a strategic approach. Queen Varea will be surrounded by courtiers and security during the ceremony. A public confrontation would likely prove counterproductive. I'm not planning to interrupt the ceremony, Nessa. I just need to get close enough to request a private audience. The probability of such a request being granted under current circumstances is approximately 12.3%. Kale paused, considering this. You have an alternative suggestion? The recording indicated that Intelligence Director Laris was involved in the plan to protect you while gathering evidence against Minister Tellus. Logically, she would be your most likely ally in gaining access to the Queen under controlled circumstances. It was a good point. Laris had promised to ensure Kale learned the truth, and the timing of the data crystal's delivery to him suggested she was finally making good on that promise. Can you locate her position within the palace complex? Nessa was silent for a moment, accessing what limited public information was available. Director Laris would likely be coordinating security for the ceremony from the Intelligence Division headquarters in the North Tower. Then that's where I'll go first. Kale finished his preparations, then hesitated at the airlock. If I'm not back within 12 hours, I will implement emergency extraction protocols, Nessa assured him. However, I calculate a 64.7% probability of your successful return, assuming you maintain emotional equilibrium. Kale smiled despite himself. I'll do my best. Wish me luck. Current scientific consensus suggests that luck, as a causal force, is statistically insignificant, Nessa replied. However, I acknowledge the cultural significance of the expression, and therefore, good luck, Kale. The journey from Orbital Platform 3 to the Palace Complex required navigating both physical and security challenges. Kale used service corridors and maintenance trams where possible. His outdated, but still functional identification codes, granting him access to areas not heavily monitored. The increased activity surrounding the ceremony worked in his favor. Support staff and security personnel were focused on their assigned duties. paying little attention to yet another figure in nondescript clothing, moving with purpose through the background infrastructure of the imperial capital. The North Tower housed various intelligence operations, its crystalline exterior belying the heavily secured facilities within. Unlike the main palace, which emphasized transparency and visibility as symbols of imperial justice, the intelligence division operated behind layers of privacy fields and quantum-locked access points. Approaching the tower directly would trigger immediate security responses. Instead, Kale targeted a service entrance used for waste reclamation, unglamorous but essential work that required regular access with minimal scrutiny. The service worker's schedule indicated a shift change in approximately 20 minutes, an ideal window for Kale to blend with departing personnel. He positioned himself in a maintenance alcove with good visibility of the entrance, studying the workers' uniforms and mannerisms as they completed their shifts. When the moment came, he timed his movements to coincide with a group of 3 technicians exiting the facility, adopting their tired posture and deliberate pace. The security scanner registered his presence, but, as he'd hoped, his old military implants provided just enough interference to register as a system glitch rather than an unauthorized entry. Once inside, Kale moved with purpose toward the upper levels, where director-level offices would be located. His knowledge of imperial architectural standards served him well, despite never having been inside this particular building. The layout followed predictable patterns established across all imperial facilities. He encountered few personnel in the service corridors, most having been reassigned to ceremony-related duties. Those he did pass paid him little attention, assuming his presence was authorized by someone else in the complex chain of command. The real challenge came at the executive level, where additional security measures, both technological and human, protected the highest-ranking intelligence officers. Kale observed from a maintenance shaft, noting the patterns of guard rotations and the positioning of surveillance systems. Direct approach was impossible. He needed a distraction. The opportunity presented itself in the form of a junior intelligence officer exiting a conference room, arms full of data pads and looking harried. Kale recognized the signs of someone tasked with last-minute preparations for a superior, likely relating to the ceremony. He waited until the officer passed near his position, then deliberately bumped into him, causing the data pads to scatter across the polished floor. "I'm so sorry," Kale apologized, immediately helping to gather the devices. "Maintenance called me up to fix a climate control issue in the director's suite, and I wasn't watching where I was going." The officer looked annoyed, but not suspicious. "Be more careful. These contain classified information for the ceremony." Of course," Kale continued helping, subtly noting the access card clipped to the officer's uniform. "The director's suite. That's Director Laris, right? I'm new to this sector." "Yes, but she's not there now. She's overseeing final security arrangements in the ceremonial chamber." The officer collected the last data pad, checking it for damage. "So I can complete the repairs without disturbing her." "Perfect." Kale straightened, offering his most disarming smile. "Thank you for understanding about the collision. Busy day for everyone, I suppose." The officer nodded distractedly, already moving on to his next task. "Use Maintenance Access 7B. The main corridor is restricted for the ceremony." "Will do," Kale replied, watching as the officer hurried away. Then, moving casually but purposefully, he headed toward the indicated maintenance access, knowing it would lead him to Director Laris's office suite. The maintenance corridor was deserted, used primarily for servicing the environmental and security systems that supported the executive offices. Kale moved quickly now, aware that his window of opportunity was limited. If Laris was indeed at the ceremonial chamber, he might have to wait for her return, a risky proposition with security at heightened levels. The access panel to Laris's suite required authorization, but Kale had anticipated this. From his pocket, he produced a small device, one of Voron's creations, designed to mimic maintenance override codes. It wouldn't work on the highest security systems, but for a maintenance access point, it should be sufficient. The panel hesitated, then flashed green, allowing him entry to a small antechamber adjacent to the director's main office. Kale slipped inside, closing the panel behind him and surveying his surroundings. The antechamber served as a workspace for Laris's assistant, currently unoccupied due to the ceremony preparations. Beyond it, a secure door led to the director's private office. That door would have significantly more robust security measures his override device couldn't hope to bypass. Kale considered his options. He could wait here, hoping to intercept Laris when she returned. But that might be hours from now, if she returned at all before the ceremony. Alternatively, he could leave a message, but any communication system in the intelligence division would be monitored. His deliberation was interrupted by the sound of the main door opening. Kale quickly positioned himself near a maintenance panel, adopting the posture of a technician at work. Director Laris entered alone, her sharp features set in concentration as she reviewed something on a personal data pad. She was older than in the recording Kale had seen. Silver now dominated her once dark hair, and additional lines marked her face. But her bearing remained that of a career intelligence operative. Alert, controlled, observant. She noticed him immediately. Of course. Her hand moved subtly toward what Kale assumed was a concealed weapon or alarm. Maintenance wasn't scheduled for today, she stated, her tone making it clear this wasn't a question, but an accusation. Kale straightened, meeting her gaze directly. No, it wasn't, Director Laris. Recognition flickered in her eyes, followed quickly by something that might have been satisfaction. Commander Damari, your timing is either impeccable or suspicious. I received your message. Laris's eyebrow arched slightly. Did you? Interesting. She moved to her desk, activating a privacy field that would prevent both electronic and physical surveillance. Only then did she continue. I assume you viewed the recording. I have. And now you're here to... What exactly? Confront the Queen? Demand reinstatement? Revenge against Tellus? I want the truth, Kale said simply. The complete truth, not just fragments from a 4-year-old recording. Laris studied him, with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to evaluating assets and threats. You look well for a man who's spent years in exile. The fringe hasn't broken you. I'm harder to break than the Empire anticipated. A thin smile crossed her face. So it seems. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. Sit, Commander. We have approximately 12 minutes before my absence from ceremony preparations becomes conspicuous. Kale remained standing. Why now? After 4 years. Why send me the recording now? Because now is when it serves a purpose. Laris's tone was matter-of-fact. Politics is about timing, Commander. Surely your time at court taught you that much. What purpose does it serve? Laris leaned forward slightly. Minister Tellus is planning a coup. We have evidence that he intends to use today's ceremony to stage an incident, one that would leave the Queen incapacitated, and him as regent under emergency powers. The implications were staggering. And you need me because you're the wild card no one expects. Tellus believes you're still bitter, angry, a potential ally against the Queen who betrayed you. The nobility thinks you're disgraced and powerless. And the Queen. Laris paused. The Queen has never stopped believing you would return. Something tightened in Kale's chest. She knew you sent me the recording? No, that was my initiative alone. The Queen has maintained a certain distance from operations concerning you. For security reasons. For emotional reasons, Kale corrected. Laris didn't deny it. Your presence at the ceremony would disrupt Tellus's carefully orchestrated plans. More importantly, it would signal to certain loyal elements in the security forces that a counter-operation is in play. You want to use me as a distraction? I want to use you as a catalyst, Laris countered. Your appearance would force Tellus to adapt his plans, likely making mistakes in the process. Kale considered this, pacing the small confines of the office. And the Queen? Does she know about Tellus's plans? She knows he's plotting something. The specifics have been difficult to ascertain. Tellus has compartmentalized the operation extensively. So I'm supposed to walk into a situation where the Minister of Security is planning a coup, with incomplete information, and somehow help prevent it? Kale shook his head. That's suicide. Possibly, Laris acknowledged. But then, you came here prepared for that possibility, didn't you? You didn't infiltrate the intelligence division just to reminisce. She was right. Of course. Kale had come prepared for whatever awaited him, including the possibility that he wouldn't leave alive. If I do this, he said finally, I want something in return. Your reputation restored, your rank reinstated. A private audience with the Queen, after the ceremony. No guards, no courtiers, no pretense. Laris's expression revealed nothing. That's for Her Majesty to decide. Then, let me rephrase. I want your word that you'll arrange an opportunity for such a meeting. Whether she accepts is her choice. The director considered this, then nodded once. Agreed. Now, we have approximately 7 minutes remaining to establish your role in today's events. The ceremonial chamber occupied the heart of the Crystal Palace. Its soaring ceiling and transparent walls designed to create the impression that the Empire's leadership operated in full view of its citizens. Today, representatives from all 17 systems filled the tiered observation galleries, their formal attire creating a kaleidoscope of color and texture against the crystal architecture. Security was omnipresent but deliberately unobtrusive. Guards in ceremonial armor positioned strategically throughout the chamber, while more practical forces remained hidden in adjacent corridors and security stations. Kale, dressed in the formal uniform of an Imperial intelligence officer, provided by Laris from her division's supplies, stood among a group of security personnel near one of the secondary entrances. His face had been subtly altered with temporary cosmetic modifications, enough to prevent immediate recognition by those who knew him only from public broadcasts of his trial. Remember, Laris had instructed during their hasty briefing, your only confirmed objective is to identify Tellus's primary operatives. We believe he has at least 3 security officers compromised, likely positioned near the ceremonial dais. Observe and report only. No heroics. From his position, Kale had a clear view of the central dais where the ceremony would take place. The crystal throne had been relocated here from its usual position in the throne room, its impossible architecture catching and refracting light in hypnotic patterns. Minister Tellus was already present, standing with other high officials in a semicircle that would eventually surround the Queen. His tall, severe figure remained much as Kale remembered, though perhaps with more gray in his close-cropped hair and deeper lines around his mouth. His posture was relaxed, confident, giving no indication of the treasonous plans Laris believed he harbored. A subtle change in the chamber's lighting signaled the ceremony's imminent commencement. The assembled dignitaries shifted into their formal positions, conversations fading to expectant silence. A series of crystalline tones echoed through the chamber, the traditional announcement of the Queen's arrival. All eyes turned to the main entrance, where a procession of royal guards in full ceremonial armor created a path of living statues. And then she appeared. Queen Viraya entered the ceremonial chamber with the measured grace that had become her signature. Her gown, a masterpiece of liquid metal and crystalline fibers, seemed to flow around her like quicksilver, catching and amplifying the chamber's light. The traditional veil of woven luminescence covered her features, creating the illusion of a face composed of pure light. Kale's breath caught despite himself. The recording had reminded him of her humanity, the woman behind the royal persona. But seeing her in her full, sovereign aspect emphasized the distance between them. She was otherworldly, untouchable, the embodiment of imperial authority. Yet he knew the truth now, knew the impossible choices she had faced, knew that beneath the ceremonial veil and perfect posture was a woman who had sacrificed her personal happiness for duty and his survival. As Vareya ascended to the crystal throne, Kale forced himself to focus on his mission. Tellus remained outwardly calm, but Kale noted a subtle tension in his shoulders, a too deliberate casualness in his stance. The minister's eyes constantly scanned the chamber, not with the alertness of security personnel, but with the anticipation of someone waiting for predetermined signals. Kale began methodically observing the security officers positioned near the dais, looking for signs of complicity, unusual positioning, excessive attention to Tellus, hands positioned too near weapons. 3 officers in particular stood out: a woman with augmented eyes, positioned directly behind the throne, a broad-shouldered man near the eastern approach to the dais, and a third, nondescript officer whose placement gave him clear lines of fire to multiple officials. The ceremony commenced with traditional invocations, statements of imperial values and commitments delivered by representatives of each system. Throughout, Vareya remained perfectly composed, responding at appropriate intervals with formal acknowledgments. As the ceremony progressed to its central component, the renewal of vows itself, Kale noticed a subtle shift in Tellus's demeanor. The minister's hand moved to adjust his formal collar, an innocuous gesture that nonetheless caught the attention of the 3 security officers Kale had identified. They were moving into position. Kale activated the subdermal communicator Laris had provided. 3 targets confirmed, moving to intercept eastern position. Without waiting for acknowledgement, he began making his way through the assembled officials, maintaining the purposeful stride of security personnel responding to a minor concern. His path would intercept the broad-shouldered officer before he could reach his apparent destination near the throne. The timing would be delicate. Intervene too soon, and Tellus might abort the operation entirely, escaping consequences. Too late, and whatever they planned for the Queen would be in motion. Kale was 3 meters from the first suspected conspirator when everything changed. Queen Vareya, in the midst of reciting the ancient vows of service to the Empire, suddenly paused. Her head turned, the luminescent veil shifting with the movement as her gaze swept across the chamber and settled directly on Kale. Even through the veil, he felt the intensity of her recognition. Impossible. The cosmetic modifications should have prevented immediate identification, especially at this distance. Yet he knew with certainty that she saw him, knew him. The moment stretched, time seeming to slow as their eyes met across the crowded chamber. Then, with a fluidity that belied the heavy ceremonial regalia, Vareya stood. "This ceremony celebrates renewal," she announced, her voice carrying effortlessly to every corner of the chamber. "A recommitment to values that sustain our empire through challenges and change." This was not part of the traditional script. Confusion rippled through the assembled dignitaries. "Today," Vareya continued, "I wish to demonstrate that renewal through action, not merely words." Her gaze remained fixed on Kale. "Sometimes, justice requires us to acknowledge past errors and rectify them, no matter how painful or politically inconvenient." Tellus stiffened visibly, his hand moving subtly toward what Kale suspected was a concealed weapon or signaling device. "Minister Tellus," Vareya said, her tone shifting to one of formal accusation. "Step forward." The chamber went absolutely still. This dramatic deviation from ceremony was unprecedented. Tellus hesitated, clearly calculating his options, before adopting an expression of dignified confusion. "Your Majesty." "Intelligence Director Laris," Vareya continued, ignoring Tellus's feigned bewilderment. "Present the evidence." Laris emerged from her position among the security personnel. A data crystal, identical to the one Kale had received, held prominently in her hand. "By your command, Your Majesty." The three security officers Kale had identified as conspirators tensed, hands moving toward weapons. Kale launched into motion, closing the distance to the nearest, the broad-shouldered man, just as the officer drew a compact energy weapon from a concealed holster. Kale's training took over, muscle memory from years of combat situations guiding his movements. A precise strike to the officer's wrist sent the weapon clattering to the crystal floor, while a follow-up blow to the solar plexus doubled the man over. Around the chamber, loyal security forces moved with coordinated precision, neutralizing the other identified threats before they could act. Clearly, Laris had been more prepared than she had revealed to Kale. Tellus, seeing his conspirators subdued, abandoned pretense. "This is a fabrication," he declared, addressing the shocked assembly rather than the Queen. "Her Majesty has been compromised by hegemony influence." "Enough, Minister," Vareya interrupted, her voice cutting through his protests with imperial authority. "The evidence against you includes your own communications with hegemony operatives, your falsification of evidence against Commander Damari 4 years ago, and your recent conspiracy to seize power during today's ceremony." She turned to the assembled representatives. "Honored delegates, I must ask your indulgence as we address this security matter. The ceremony will resume shortly." As royal guards moved to surround Tellus, Vareya's attention returned to Kale, who stood over the subdued conspirator, his borrowed uniform now somewhat disheveled from the brief struggle. "Commander Damari," she said, using his military title for the first time since his trial. "Your presence is unexpected." The chamber erupted in murmurs as recognition spread. The disgraced commander, supposedly exiled to the fringe, standing before them in imperial uniform. Kale straightened, meeting her gaze across the distance that separated them. "Your Majesty," he responded, his voice carrying in the suddenly hushed chamber. "I received intelligence that your life might be in danger. My duty to the Empire compelled me to act." It was a diplomatic answer, giving her room to control the narrative. She could claim his presence was part of a counterintelligence operation, preserving both their dignities in this public setting. Vareya's posture softened, almost imperceptibly, a change likely noticed only by those who knew her well. "The Empire acknowledges your service, Commander, and recognizes that previous conclusions regarding your loyalty may have been premature." The implication was clear. Public rehabilitation had begun. The whispers around the chamber intensified. Before the moment could develop further, Laris intervened smoothly. "Your Majesty, with your permission, we should secure the prisoners and complete a security sweep before resuming the ceremony." "Proceed, Director." Vareya returned to the crystal throne, once again the perfect image of imperial composure. "Honored representatives, I ask for your patience during this brief interruption." As Tellus and his co-conspirators were escorted from the chamber, Kale found himself guided away by members of Laris's security team, not as a prisoner, but as an asset being debriefed. A final glance over his shoulder showed Vareya watching his departure, her expression unreadable behind the luminescent veil. The aftermath of the attempted coup consumed hours of careful security operations and political maneuvering. Kale, having provided his statement to Intelligence Division officers, waited in a small but comfortable room in a secure section of the palace. Not a cell. The door remained unlocked. Refreshments had been provided, and his status appeared to be that of honored asset rather than suspect. Still, the waiting stretched his patience. The ceremony had presumably resumed and concluded. Tellus and his conspirators were in custody, and Vareya had recognized him instantly, despite the cosmetic modifications, had acknowledged him publicly, had begun the process of restoring his reputation. But what did that mean for them? For the relationship that had existed before his trial and exile? Did anything remain of what they had shared? Or had 4 years of separation and duty erased those connections? The door opened, interrupting his thoughts. Director Laris entered, looking weary but satisfied. Tellus has confessed to the conspiracy, she announced without preamble. Facing execution, he's attempting to bargain with information about his hegemony contacts. Will it work? Kale asked. No. Laris's response was matter-of-fact. The evidence against him is too substantial, the charges too serious, but we'll extract whatever intelligence value we can before the sentence is carried out. Kale nodded, then asked the question that had been burning in his mind. And the Queen? Laris studied him for a moment. Her Majesty has completed the ceremony and retired to her private chambers. A pause. Then, she has requested your presence. Despite anticipating this possibility, hoping for it, even Kale felt a surge of anxiety. When? Now. Laris moved toward the door. I'll escort you. The palace is still in a heightened security state. The journey to the Queen's private chambers took them through sections of the palace Kale remembered well from his time as a trusted commander with royal access. Yet subtle changes were evident. Additional security measures, modified architectural elements, new art installations that reflected developments in imperial culture during his absence. 4 years, a lifetime in some ways, a moment in others. They arrived at an ornate entrance Kale recognized immediately, the formal antechamber to the Queen's private quarters. 2 royal guards stood at attention, their crystalline armor gleaming under the ambient light. Commander Damari, as requested by Her Majesty, Laris announced. The guards nodded in acknowledgement, stepping aside to allow passage. Laris turned to Kale. I've fulfilled my part of our agreement, she said quietly. What happens next is between you and the Queen. With a brief nod, she departed, leaving Kale to face what awaited alone. The antechamber doors opened silently, revealing the familiar space beyond, a transition area between public and private realms, designed to allow the monarch moments of decompression between official duties and personal time. The chamber was empty, save for the Master of Ceremonies, who had been present during Kale's confrontation in the throne room days earlier. Commander, the Master acknowledged, his genetically modified features as impassive as ever. Her Majesty awaits in the solarium. You remember the way? I do, Kale confirmed, his voice steadier than he felt. Then I shall withdraw. Her Majesty has dismissed all attendants for the evening. As the Master departed, Kale stood alone in the antechamber, gathering his thoughts. The solarium, a crystal-domed garden where Vareya often retreated when the burdens of rule became overwhelming. It had been their special place, once. The choice of location for this meeting felt significant. With a deep breath, he proceeded through the Queen's private chambers, each room triggering memories of a time before exile, before betrayal and misunderstanding had separated them. Finally, he reached the solarium entrance, a simple archway entwined with bioluminescent vines that responded to the presence of visitors by glowing more intensely. Beyond the arch, the solarium spread out in carefully cultivated beauty, a collection of rare plants from across the 17 systems, arranged to create an environment of tranquil harmony. The crystal dome above revealed the night sky, where Varus Prime's 3 moons cast overlapping patterns of silvery light. And there, seated on a simple bench beside a pool of glowing water, was Vareya. She had removed the ceremonial regalia. Gone was the liquid metal gown, the luminescent veil, the formal posture of imperial authority. Instead, she wore a simple dress of deep blue, her dark hair falling loose around shoulders that seemed to bear the invisible weight of 17 systems. She looked up as he entered, her face fully visible for the first time since his return. The genetic perfection that characterized imperial nobility was present in her features. The symmetry, the clarity of her green-gold eyes, the flawless skin. But so too were the signs of the human beneath the Queen, slight shadows beneath her eyes, a certain tension around her mouth, expressions of strain no cosmetic modification could fully conceal. For a moment, neither spoke. 4 years of separation, of misunderstanding and longing, created a gulf between them that words seemed inadequate to bridge. Finally, Varaya broke the silence. "You came back." Her voice, stripped of its ceremonial augmentation, held a warmth Cale had feared might be lost forever. "I received the recording," he replied simply. "Laris," Varaya nodded slightly. "I suspected, though she didn't confirm it. She was fulfilling her promise to you, from 4 years ago." Varaya's gaze dropped to the glowing pool. "Too late, perhaps." "Why?" Cale moved closer, though still maintaining a respectful distance. "Why wait 4 years to clear my name?" "Politics," she answered, an edge of bitterness in her tone. "Always politics. Tellus's influence grew after your trial. He leveraged the success of exposing a traitor to consolidate power within the security apparatus. Challenging him required patience, evidence, allies. And my exile was the price of that strategy." "Yes." She looked up at him again, her expression open, in a way it rarely was outside these private moments. "A price I paid as well, Cale. Every day for 4 years." The use of his name, not his rank or title, shifted something between them. A small step back toward what had been. "I believed you betrayed me," he admitted. "For 4 years. I thought you had sacrificed me for political convenience." "I know." Her voice was soft but steady. "I had to let you believe that. Any communication, any hint of continued connection between us, would have put you at risk. Tellus would have found a way to eliminate you permanently. So instead you let me hate you." "Yes." No excuses. No justifications. Just the simple acknowledgement of the choice she had made. Cale moved to the bench, sitting beside her, with a careful distance between them. "When I came to the throne room, showed you the data crystal, you knew immediately what it contained. I suspected. The timing aligned with Laris's increased surveillance of Tellus, and your return." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You wouldn't have come back without significant reason. You could have had me arrested, confiscated the crystal." "To what end?" Varaya turned slightly toward him. "You already knew the truth, or you would soon, and—" She hesitated. "And perhaps I was tired of the deception, tired of being the villain in your story." The admission, so human, so contrary to the perfect composure of the imperial sovereign, reached something in Cale that 4 years of anger had walled away. "I said you would miss me," he recalled quietly. "When your guards escorted me out." "I heard you." Her hand moved almost imperceptibly closer to his on the bench between them. "And I did. Every day." The simple confession hung in the air between them, more powerful for its understatement. Cale looked at her, really looked at her, beyond the queen to the woman, and saw the toll the years had taken. The isolation of rule, the burden of impossible choices, the loneliness she concealed beneath imperial composure. "What happens now?" he asked. "Officially, your record will be expunged. Your rank and honors restored. The formal announcement will come tomorrow, citing new evidence and the exposure of Tellus's treachery. And unofficially?" Varia's eyes met his directly. "That depends on you, Cale. 4 years is a long time. We are both different people now. What I want—" She paused, seeming to struggle with the rare experience of uncertainty. "What I want may not align with what you want anymore." In that moment of vulnerability, the distance between queen and exile collapsed. Cale reached across the space between them, his hand covering hers on the bench. "Tell me what you want," he said softly. Not as the queen, as Varaya. She looked at their hands, then back to his face. "I want what I cannot have. A life where duty doesn't require sacrificing everything else. Where choices aren't always between bad and worse." Her fingers turned beneath his, intertwining. I want time back. Our time. We can't have that, Kale acknowledged. But perhaps we can have something new. Something that acknowledges who we are now, what we've been through. The court would never... I'm not asking the court, he interrupted gently. I'm asking you. Varia fell silent. The struggle between the woman and the queen, visible in her expression. Finally, she squeezed his hand. I don't know if it's possible. The demands of rule, the politics, the expectations, they haven't changed. Then we change, Kale suggested. We find a new way, together. She studied him, searching his face for something, reassurance, perhaps, or confirmation that he understood what he was proposing. It would not be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. A genuine smile, small but real, curved her lips. When did you become a philosopher? Exile offers ample time for reflection. The moment of levity broke some of the tension between them. Varia's posture relaxed slightly, her shoulder brushing against his as she shifted on the bench. I missed this, she admitted. Your particular brand of irreverence. The way you see through the ceremony to what matters. And I missed you, Kale replied simply. Even when I thought I hated you. I missed you. The admission hung between them, honest and unadorned. Then, with the deliberate movement of someone crossing a threshold, Varia leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a kiss of reunion, of forgiveness asked and granted, of possibility rather than certainty. When they separated, something had changed in her expression, a lightness, a spark of the woman who existed beneath the weight of imperial responsibility. This is where you say something appropriately dramatic, she prompted, a hint of teasing in her tone. Something befitting a man who stormed a throne room just to tell a queen she would miss him. Kale smiled, his hand still entwined with hers. How about this? I'm not leaving again. Whether as a commander, an advisor, or simply the man who loves you, I'm staying. Varia's free hand rose to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw as if relearning its contours. The court will talk. The court always talks, let them. She laughed softly, a sound rare enough to be precious. Perhaps you're right. Her expression grew more serious. But understand what you're agreeing to. I am still the queen. The empire must come first. There will be times when duty separates us, when decisions must be made that serve the greater good rather than our happiness. I understand, Kale assured her. I'm not asking you to choose between me and the empire. I'm asking for the chance to stand beside you, to help carry the weight rather than add to it. Varia studied him for a long moment, then nodded once, a gesture of decision that carried the weight of her authority even in this private setting. Then we will try, together. As if to seal this new understanding, she leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder as they gazed up through the crystal dome at the 3 moons of Varus Prime. The future remained uncertain, the challenges substantial, but in this moment, this fragile, precious moment of reconnection, they had found a beginning. Not a perfect resolution, but a promise, a possibility, a path forward through the complex reality of their lives. And for now, that was enough.